Today's episode is titled, Your Normal Changed, but the Bills Didn't. Today, we're going to be dealing on home. The food is put away, the flowers are starting to wilt, and you are sitting there looking at a pile of mail on the table. Bills, statements, and it hits you. The world did not stop just because your heart did. What I am about to share with you could save you some confusion. It could save you from some confusion. It could protect you from some people who may try to take advantage of your pain. And it can remind you that God has not forgotten about you, not even in this midnight season. This is Sunrise After Midnight. I'm Deborah Hamm, and my story, your story, and their story is not over. Okay. As you noticed, I want to first say thank you for tuning in today for this episode. This episode, as I stated earlier, is going to be dealing with finances. The sources that I researched and will use some information in today are from the Social Security Administration, the National Funeral Directors Association, Federal Trade Commission Funeral Rule, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and the LIMRA, LIMRA, Insurance Barometer Study of 2025. That is the information resources that I'm using today, but I'm also going to be using the Bible as well, because we're going to use that in every episode, and things that I've learned from my own training and studying while I was receiving my own certification in grief care. So let's just start open with a word of prayer. Most gracious and heavenly Father, Father God, I come to you as humble as I know how, asking you, Lord, to just lead me in the way that you would have me to go, that the words would reach whom you want these words to reach on this day. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. You know, one of the things is that I was thinking about today is every week when I end an episode, I always pray and I ask the Lord, which way do you want me to go next week? And I wait for his instructions and his guidance. And then I research and place episodes together. So as I'm thinking about today's, and I'm talking about money today, money we all know is a very sensitive area in everyone's life. Also, we also know that there are challenges right now in society and the economy with money. But as we move into this particular episode, I want to show you some of the effects of finances when a person is grieving, and give you a little bit of knowledge or intel about some things that maybe you should check out. Some of you today who are tuned in, you might be tuned in to this episode because someone sent this episode to you, and maybe you do not even think of yourself as grieving. You just know something feels wrong, okay? You're exhausted, and you're exhausted in a way that sleep does not fix. You're disconnected from people you used to feel so close to. Sometimes you're just angry and you cannot explain why. Sometimes you just cry for no reason and you don't understand why, and you can't stop. All of these things happen, and sometimes you are just numb when dealing with grief. But nobody has given you a name for what you're carrying sometimes. Sometimes when you're going through these various layers of emotions, you don't really understand what they are and you don't have a name for it. But I want you to know something today. Before we go any further, I want you to know that what you are feeling has a name. And it could possibly be grief. You see, you cannot comfort what you cannot identify. You cannot find community around something you have never named. And grief is not just for people who lost somebody to death. You see, it is for anyone who lost something that matters. It could be a marriage, a job, a pet, a friendship, a version of your life that's suddenly altered. Today, we're talking about something maybe nobody warned you about when you lose someone. People tell you about the stages of grief. They bring food, they sit with you in the pain, but the moment everyone goes home, those bills, them bills are still there. The accounts are still there. The phone call and the paperwork and the financial decisions are still there. Your normal changed, but the bills, and they did not. And I want to briefly walk through that a little bit with you today. Not as a financial advisor, because I am not a financial advisor. I am not a licensed therapist. I am not. I am certified in grief care as well as certified in grief care facilitation. But as someone who has also sat in that exact same place of how that normal changed, but the bills did not, as someone who has carried exactly what some of you might be carrying right now, I'm going to let you know, we're going to keep it real. I mentioned before, unfiltered. Yes, finances can add a layer of grief onto the layer of grief. But before we get into that, let me tell you about a woman who had the grief and the bills at the same time in the Bible. Her name actually wasn't given. It's in 2 Kings, the 4th chapter and the 1st through the 7th verse, but I'm just going to read to you the commentary in my Bible, and I'm reading from the Christian Standard Bible, and it says in here, in reference to that this woman was in an economic, emotional, and spiritual crisis. In going to Elijah, she was seeking a spiritual solution for her dilemma. This story is a reminder that God is God, and we're not. That blessings, sometimes physical, but always spiritual, come when we respond to his word with faith and obedience. I just read that out of the Christian Standard Bible. I read the commentary part, some of the commentary part from 2 Kings, the 4th chapter, verses 1 through 7. Now, this woman that we're talking about very briefly here right now, she lived thousands of years ago. And one of the things is, know that this particular woman had lost her husband. Her husband had transitioned, and she had barely enough time to process what had happened before there was a knock at the door. And the knock at the door, it was creditors. They were not coming for money. They were coming for something worse. They told her that because of her debt that her husband had left, they were going to take her two sons, her children, as payment. Oh, I can't even imagine that. I said I was going to keep it real and unfiltered. Oh, them was like, them was some fighting words. You gonna come and take my child? No, 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 no. Can you imagine carrying the loss of your spouse, and now someone is standing at your door threatening to take your children too? You see, this woman was grieving, and she was broke, and now she's being threatened all at the same time. She went to the prophet Elisha, 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 and she told him everything. Elijah asked her a question, and he asked her what did she have in her house. And she informed him that all she had was one jar, a jar of oil. Okay? Now, she said she didn't have nothing. She didn't have nothing but that one jar of oil. Now, God took that jar of oil, and we're going to tell you what happened. Elijah told her, he said, go to your neighbors and borrow empty jars, okay? Take them home, close the door, and he asked her to get as many of these jars as she could. And when she went inside and she was to close the door, she was to start pouring, and she was to pour from that one. Remember, she only had one small jar. She was to start pouring from that one small jar. And she did it. And that one jar filled the very first borrowed jar, and then it filled the next, and the next, and the next. And she kept pouring, and it kept flowing. It did not stop until every single jar was full. The oil only stopped when there were no more jars. Elijah told her to go sell the oil and pay her debt, and then live off of what was left. No, I am not telling you to go borrow some empty jars from nobody and start pouring some canola oil, olive oil, vegetable oil, none of that in it. I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you about what happened in the Bible thousands of years ago. Okay? She came to Elijah with nothing but pain and one small jar. She left with everything she needed. And I'm telling you who are listening right now, that woman's story is true for somebody today. Somebody who's been going through a loss, or dealing with a loss, maybe broke and bombarded with debt and going through. But the same God, I'm going to say it, the same God who multiplied that oil is the same God today. God has not changed. It says, God says that I am the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. But before we get to the practical steps, you see, I needed to show you something here. I needed to show you that struggles didn't just start happening. It's been throughout time, because the struggle that widow faced thousands of years ago, the numbers today say that millions of people are living her story right now. The real numbers that sometimes people don't tell you before the funeral is what I'm getting ready to share with you right now. So let's talk about funeral costs first, because this is the bill that hits before you have even had time to breathe. This is the financial layer of grief that some people have to deal with before they have time to breathe. This is what I learned from my research. The National Funeral Directors Association for 2026 stated that $8,300 is your average traditional funeral with burial before cemetery fees. $8,300. They also said that once you add the vault or the headstone and the cemetery plot, that number climbs from the $8,300 to possibly $10,000 to $13,000. And that source came from the NFDA. Think about that. With the cremation, funeral with the cremation and memorial service, the average has now surpassed the burial by 61% of families who chose it in 2026. That cost went from $4,200 to $6,500. And then there's the direct cremation, no service, no viewing. Well, that costs $1,500 to $2,500, which was the most affordable option for a lot of families today. Now, here's what I'll tell you before you walk through the door. The casket is almost always the most expensive single item, because a casket can run anywhere from $900 to over $10,000. But here's something you need to know. Under the FTC funeral rule, you have the legal right to buy one from a third-party seller, and they do have to accept it. They cannot charge you for a handling fee. That's one fact alone can save you anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. There's also one fee you cannot decline. Every funeral home charges a basic services of funeral director and staff fee. That covers their overhead, their permits, and their coordination. Everything else you can choose. You see, these are things that you need to know because you're grieving already. And sometimes some of the decisions that we make financially without thinking, it can add more grief or another layer of it on top of the layer that we're already dealing with. Do not let grief rush you into spending money you do not have on things you did not choose. I want to talk for a moment to the person where there's a life insurance gap, to let you know you're not alone, because we're living in a society where so many people do not have life insurance. And I really, really want to ask you, wherever you live, check into some life insurance. Because I need you to hear this before you go one more second feeling ashamed about it. This is what research says. There are over 102 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured when it comes to life insurance. Over 102 million. 30% Americans who would face financial hardship within 1 month of losing a wage earner. 30%. There is an 11-point gap of women who are less likely to have life insurance than men. This is research. These are statistics. I'm going to also let you know where I got all this information from, because there's also 72% of Americans who overestimate the cost of a basic term life insurance policy. Most people think that it costs far more than it actually does. Not today, not next week, but I do plan on having an episode where I will have a guest person who specializes in insurance that can explain some things a little better to you than I can, because as I stated before, I am not an insurance advisor or anything. I'm speaking off of research, and I'm speaking off of life experiences. So if you're sitting at that kitchen table right now with no life insurance, you're not the exception. It's sad to say that you are in the majority, and that does not make it easier. But it means you are not alone. You are not foolish, and you are not forgotten. It means you can make a step towards correcting. Because if there was no life insurance, your starting point is what you do have. And the first call is to Social Security. The lady in the Bible was a widow, and she lost her husband. A person who is a widow or a widower who loses their spouse, your first step, Social Security, to check to see if you even have, or if you're eligible for survivor benefits. Call, regardless, call and ask the question, because this is one of the most important steps you can take and one of the most overlooked steps. Let me give you some numbers in reference to Social Security. There are 3.8 billion plus widows and widowers currently receiving Social Security survivor benefit. That source came from a Social Security Administration research of 2025. Now, here's what you need to know about how this works. When I talk about finances, the reason I'm mentioning that is because sometimes when a person is dealing with grief and the person life changes suddenly, it's not just the emotion of it. It's not just the physical changes that can happen, but it is in some cases financial. No, I'm not talking to that person who got it all together, who is not having no financial challenges or problems. No. But if you know somebody who is, and you can help them with the knowledge, that's very important. Because you see, sometimes it's the lack of knowledge that adds an unnecessary layer to the grief that people are dealing with. I want to deal with some practical steps right now. I want to slow down for a minute, and I want to say that the reason I said the normal changed, but the bills did not, is because sometimes society looks at grief, whether it's anticipatory, compound, disenfranchised, sudden, unexpected, whatever type it is, and they look at the emotions that a person is going through. Some people can bounce back the next day. Let's keep it real. Some people can bounce back the next week. Let's keep it real. Some people don't bounce back that quickly. But the truth of it is, only people really know what's happening is you and God, to be honest. And it's hard on a person enough when they're dealing with grief, period. But then when that financial part hits on top of it, that's hard. When a person has to go to do GoFundMe to help out, or car washes, or dinners to sell, have you ever taken time out to think how difficult that may have been for that person or persons? Some people are extremely private, and to be able to do something of that nature, that means publicly is being put out there. But also, when you're supporting, you need to know for sure that that's legit too, because in this world today, we encounter so many people who scam. And you got to make sure that what you're doing and that it's legit, you know. When a person is grieving, finances can set them back. Because I just gave you some statistics on some costs of just preparing for services. I didn't tell you nothing about the cost for cemeteries. I didn't tell you nothing about the cost of the bills on a monthly basis. When a person loses a loved one, sometimes they even grieve the fact of a struggle. And to assume that everybody got it figured out, that's not even accurate than others. And that's why we need to learn passion. We need to have passion, confidentiality. When dealing with grief and when incorporating a grief ministry or a organization is even going to teach it, there is more to grief than just learning the definitions. There's more than fixing a meal. I think of the persons I've encountered during this grief journey, and I've shared with them in tears. You see, in a world where the economy is, I'm going to just say, challenging, do not assume that every person grieving has a handle on everything. What I want to say is this. When I think about finances, like I said earlier, that's a touchy, sensitive area. But it exists. I'm placing on my website today, after this episode, a free resource, emphasis on free, that's going to be titled Financial Side of Grief. And in it, I'm going to give you some very valuable information. If you go to my website, drham-author.com, and click on the free tab on the navigational bar and just scroll all the way down, you'll see the free resource. Each week I'm going to place something free there that can help you. Because you see, we have to look at, when dealing with grief, it's not just dealing with the types. It's not just dealing with the physical side effects. It's not just dealing with taking it 1 second at a time. It's also dealing with everybody is different. It's dealing with every situation is different. It's dealing with every financial level is different. And in some cases, we're dealing with military. See, that's another thing. When dealing with military families, that's a whole nother level. And I want to take a moment and just speak directly to the military family. First of all, for anyone that's listening to this who is in the military, I want to say thank you for your service. As a veteran, you need to be familiar with that area as well. Because if your loved one served in the military, there may be benefits that belong to you. Don't assume that just because a person was in the military that there are benefits for you. There's certain situations for that as well. And there are too many families who are not familiar with that. I'm not going to get into all of that right now, but I want to address only one thing when it comes to military. When a veteran is buried with full military honors, you may hear the rifles, okay? Some people call that the 21 gun salute, but it's not called a 21 gun salute. It's a rifle volley. It's 3 shots fired in sequence as a final salute. You hear the horn, the taps, you know, that bugle sound, the call that has honored the fallen in Civil War. And you watch as the team of service members folds the American flag. And they fold it very precise and very deliberate. But did you know that while this is going on, that sometimes just that alone brings another layer? You see what I'm trying to show you? I'm trying to give you an inside look at the emotions that sometimes we don't look at or think about. And some of the things that go along with grief. So much happens that we at times just do not deal with, and we need to protect ourselves from. And the financial portion of it can actually break a person down. I got very quiet on that one because when I think of a person who is dealing with grief, whether it's through, as I stated before, death, marriage, a pet, a friendship, a job loss, whatever it's through, when a person is already dealing with that, when finances hit on top of it, it can almost break a person down. And do you stop and think how hard it may be for that person to ask for help? And that's why we have to see people where they are and not assume, When a person is carrying grief, they're vulnerable. And when they're carrying a financial level of pain on top of that, sometimes it's just unbearable. If anyone pressures you to make a financial decision quickly, slow down. Slow down. Look at what you have. And don't be embarrassed by what you don't have. Does that make sense? If anyone contacts you out of nowhere, offering financial help you did not ask for, be very careful. If anyone tells you that you must decide right now, don't speed up. Stop, think, check it out, resource. Because the decisions you make financially early during grief, they do affect you. When going to a legitimate person who deals with finances, they give you time. They don't tell you, oh, you better do this right now. You better get this. No. So I'm saying, do not make any major financial decisions in the first year at least. I've learned that. Not the house, not the investments, not the big moves. Give yourself some time to find your footing first. And for people who are helping people who are dealing with grief, give them time. For someone who doesn't know, I want to introduce you to somebody. I introduced you earlier to a woman who was dealing with a lot, and God took little and made much for her. But now I want to introduce you to someone else. Because somebody listening right now is not just dealing with grief and dealing with bills. They might even be dealing with embarrassment. They might be feeling unseen, which, as we stated before, was disenfranchised grief. Somebody is carrying all this weight, and they're doing it completely alone. They're doing it without an anchor. They're doing it without a foundation. They're doing it without anybody to call on. And if that's you, I want you to know something. Jesus is not a religion. He is a relationship. Let me tell you something. There's a song that says, in times like these, you need a savior. And in times like these, you need an anchor. So be sure, be very sure, your anchor holds and grips the solid rock. This rock is Jesus. Remember this, Jesus is not a religion. He is a relationship. When dealing with grief, when dealing with finances on top, hold on to Jesus. This is what I want you to know about the relationship. A relationship with the Lord changes everything. When you know him for yourself, you're never really alone. Talk to him. Hey, that's what the woman with the oil did. When she spoke to Elijah, her faith and trust, that was spiritual. I have a relationship with the Lord. But after I went through my series of grief, I established a more intimate walk with him. So I'm going to tell you this. As I stated before, when you know Jesus, when you know the Lord, you're not alone. You're not by yourself. I mean, at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep, you're not by yourself. You're not sitting at that kitchen table, sitting in that car, sitting outside. You're not alone. God is constant when everything else shifts. And he can give you that peace that surpasses all understanding. He knows your name. He knows your pain. Call on him. Because even if you made the wrong financial decisions and you're still here, you have time to make the right ones. We celebrated the Resurrection Sunday this past Sunday and Holy Week. And Jesus died on the cross for our sin. He rose again 3 days later. And the same God can hear you. Talk to him, accept him in your heart, and ask him to guide you in the right way with making decisions. Check out the places, call them, ask questions. Don't be rushing making decisions, but if you have already, it's not too late to get it right. I'm going to say this. Find a church home to help you. A lot of churches now, they have financial classes to help you to learn. Enroll in them. Don't feel embarrassed or ashamed of what you don't have, but aim on getting back on track. That woman in the Bible was dealing with grief and debt and a threat where they wanted to take her children. She didn't have a financial plan, and she did not have a savings account. She had loss. She had a debt that she could not pay. She had children that she was terrified of losing. And she had one small jar. And God turned it into more than enough. So I'm going to ask you to turn it over to God. And I'm going to leave you with 3 anchors. Not decoration, anchors. You know how before I left you with diamonds? I'm going to leave you with some anchors today as I get ready to close. Psalms 146:9. The Lord preserveth the strangers. He relieveth the fatherless and the widow. God sees you specifically. You're not invisible to him. Not in what you're carrying. Not in your finance. Not in any of it. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways. Acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. Proverbs 3rd chapter 5th through the 6th verse. When the financial decisions feel impossible, and some of them will, this is your anchor. Acknowledge God in it. Ask for wisdom. Take the next right step. He will direct them. Trusting God does not mean being passive. It means taking wise, unhurried steps while believing that God is working in what you cannot yet see. That's not lack of faith. That is wisdom. And before I let you go today, I want you to go know that on my website, there will be a free resource ready for you, probably 1 hour after this episode, and it's going to be titled The Financial Side of Grief. It will be covering everything we talked about today and more. It's going to deal with consumer rights and what to do about bills and accounts and your complete first step checklist. Go to drham-author.com and get your copy. It is free, it is faith-based, and it was written for exactly where you might be right now. Share today's episode with someone who needs it. And I'm going to say this. If you need prayer, go to your church, get on the prayer line, call somebody who you trust, go to kingdompurposemedia.com. They do have a prayer line there. And ask, get help. Talk to somebody. Share today's episode with someone. You may not know who they are yet, but God does. This is Sunrise After Midnight. And I want you to remember, my story, your story, their story is not